let's talk about Chapter 3, Measures and Time Signatures. First, let's review what a measure is. So a measure is really just the section between two bar lines. They're usually a little straighter than that. But this line right here is the bar line. So these are each your bar lines. And the music that's in between there is called your measure. In a lot of music, those measures are going to be numbered, or sometimes if you're in a band or a choir, you are asked to number every single measure so that your conductor can say, we're going to start on page 3, measure 49, and everyone knows where to start and you can begin together. If we didn't have these bar lines or measures, you would just have to be like, we're on page 3 on the 127th note. So this helps us organize our music. At the end of your music, you're going to have a double bar line. The second line is just a little bit fatter than the first one. If there's 2 dots next to it, that makes it a repeat sign, which you see a lot of times in songs that have more than one verse, or if a certain section gets repeated. And at that point, you'll either repeat and go back to the very beginning, or if there's another matching repeat sign somewhere in the middle, you would go to that matching repeat sign. Okay, so that's our measures and bar lines. Now let's talk about how we know how many beats are going to go in those measures. And that's determined by our time signature, which is really the bulk of this chapter. So if you've seen sheet music before, you'll have noticed that there are some numbers at the beginning that look like a fraction. And if you have not seen a time signature before or not seen sheet music before, go look at some. Go to RBC, go to Barnes & Noble, look in the music section and look at some sheet music and look at the numbers. So usually after your clef, and remember we might have a grand staff or it might just be your treble or bass staff. After your clef, there is a fraction looking set of numbers, but that's our time signature. The way we say this one, if this is your time signature, is we say 4/4. If it were a 3 on the top, we would say 3/4, etc. So you don't say 4/4 or whatever. Here is the definition of a time signature, and I'm going to write it kind of big so that we can see it. The top number of the time signature tells us how many beats are in the measure. Now, I'm not talking about how many notes are in the measure. I'm talking about how many beats are in the measure. So if there's a 4 on the top, the notes value of the beats are all going to add up to 4. Okay? The bottom number tells us what kind of note gets the beat. And remember in chapter 2, I told you that for the most part, we're going to talk about our quarter note as getting 1 beat. That's what we're talking about here, is when there's a 4 on the bottom of that time signature is when we're counting that quarter note as getting 1 beat, which honestly, it's probably most pop music nowadays is going to have that 4 on the bottom. But there are some other ways to count where you don't count the quarter note as 1 beat. Don't be too confused by that. We'll talk about that later and hopefully it'll be pretty clear to you. For the most part though, when there's that 4 on the bottom, quarter note gets 1 beat, which then makes our half note gets 2 beats, whole note gets 4 beats, which means that our eighth notes still each get a half of a beat, etc. Just like we talked about in the last chapter. So let's go ahead and fill in some measures and talk about how we do that in 4/4. So if we have a measure in 4/4, we said that there have to be 4 beats in every measure. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw in some measures here, and let's fill it in. We could have, let's see, you go ahead and think about what we could have. We could have, what's one note that we could put in there to take up the whole measure? Whole. That was a hint. Whole. Whole note. So the whole note does take up the whole measure in 4/4. So that would be the only thing that we would need to put in there. Remember, it's 4 beats. It's not 4 notes. So that's only 1 note, but it takes up the whole measure. If I turn that into a half note, how many beats is in there so far? 2. So how many more beats do I need to put in there? 2. And I could do that a couple different ways. I only really have room for another one right now. But if I had more space, I could put that in there. Now I'm being real simple right now. I could put in some of those more complicated notes like we did earlier, where we could put in our dotted 8th, 16th, which remember that was 1 beat, so we would have 2, plus that's my 3rd beat. Now for my my 4th beat, I could put in a quarter rest. I could put in my squiggly line, which I'm awful at drawing. But as long as that adds up to 4 beats, you're good to go. Now, if I need to do a measure that is in 3/4, the value of the notes, the way we count them, has not changed because there's still a 4 on the bottom. But now if there's a 3 on the top, how many beats are going to be in the measure? 3. Okay, if there were 2 on the top, how many beats would be in the measure? 2. If there was a 975 on top, there'd be 975. That would be really ridiculous, but who knows, it might exist. So let's go back to 3 beats in the measure. What's one kind of a note that would take up the whole measure now? Could we put a whole note in there? No, we can't, because that is too many beats. So the kind of note that would take up the whole measure now, is it a half note? No, half note only gets 2 beats. But remember the dot rule. So all we have to do, add Mr. Dot, and we have 3 beats in the measure. You can fill it in the rest however you want, okay? You could be as creative as you want. You could put in 3/4 notes. You could make it all crazy with a whole bunch of 16th notes. So you could put your 4 16th notes, and then that's 4 sounds on 1 beat. So that would take up 1 beat, and then you could fill it in with half note. So many options. And remember, rests are an option as well, because rests still count as beats. They're just silent beats. Okay, so this is how we do it when we're in what we call simple time. Okay, in simple time, that is where we consider the beat to be divided by 2, or we can group our notes in groups of 2s. When we're in 4/4, you're always going to be counting this usually like 1, 2, and 3, 4, and, or if they were 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and. Every one of the main beat that you feel is divided in pair, basically in 2. So simple meter, when we consider something to be in simple meter, we have those divisions of 2. And why that's important is that is in contrast from what we'll learn in a little bit, which is compound meter. When it feels different, music has a different feeling, and the 8th notes and different notes get grouped differently, and it just looks different as well. So the definition of simple, think about time signatures like 4/4, 3/4 would be simple meter, 2/4 would be simple meter, and then we also have some other meters that are in simple meter. And I want to also tell you that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was in 4/4. Another way to write 4/4 is a C, which stands for common time. So C stands for common time because 4/4 is the most common time signature. Another thing you might see is that's called cut time. You basically cut your 4/4 in half, so you have 2/2. That means now, since there's a 2 on the bottom, you're counting it as if the half note now gets the beat. And there can be a total of 2 half notes in the beat. So what could that look like? If there's 2 half notes in the measure, okay, but we now are just counting those as each getting 1 beat, does that look like we could also write it in 4/4? It does. They actually look exactly the same, but they'll just be counted in a different way. A lot of times something that's in cut time or 2/2 is a piece that goes really fast, like a march. So therefore, instead of the musicians and the conductor having to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you would just count 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you would count this instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, you would count 1, 2, 1, 2, etc. So anyway, 2/2 or cut time would be another example of a simple meter. And another meter that you might see with a 2 on the bottom would be 3/2. You'll see this in some older music. The Allstate Choir had a piece that was in 3/2 last year. And instead of there being 2 half notes in each measure, there are 3 half notes in each measure. Remember, because now the half note we consider and feel like gets the beat, and there's 3 of them in each measure. So in a way, you can think about the values as kind of being cut in half. Because before, in common time, or in 4/4, we thought of the half note as getting how many beats? 2. Whereas now we're kind of thinking about the half note as getting 1. So if you're a math person and a numbers person, to figure out how many beats go in each measure, if you're in a time signature that has a 2 on the bottom, you can just cut the value of everything in half, fill it in, add up to 3, you're good to go. Again, that's not as common as not as common, haha, did you like my joke? But anyway, that's how you would count it. And 3/2 would be considered a part of this simple meter like we're talking about today. Also, on my YouTube playlist, I have a playlist called 4/4 time signature. I have one called 3/4 time signature. I urge you to go listen to the music that I've selected, and I picked all sorts of different genres of music for you. But hopefully you can hear the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember from your textbook reading that in 4/4, the strong beats are going to be on the first beat. Sometimes there's a secondary strong beat on beat 3, but really listen for that downbeat or the first beat of the measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you'll often hear that in the drum part or the bass part from the guitar. In 3/4, you'll listen for almost like a waltz-like feeling. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So listen for that strong beat on beat 1 in the songs that I picked that are in 3/4. Next up, we're going to talk about compound meter. So make sure you have a good handle on simple meter. Go ahead and do your worksheets that relate to simple meter, and then let's move on to compound meter.